ANC commission, right? And then there's about, I think there's 38 commissions around the city right now. So I think that's about 370 ANC individual commissioners. So every ward has a series, like 5 or 6 ANC commissions, right? So in Ward 1, there's ANC 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. In Ward 7, I think it's B, C, D. They skipped to A. They went B, C, D, E, and F. Okay, right, and F. So yeah, so you want to get to know your ANC commissioner because they're the most local elected official that you can knock on their door. And they're right here, right now. Shall we introduce them? Okay, so on far left is Commissioner Nancy. Oh my God. How did I blank a minute? I've been working with Nancy and the Commission for a while here. Jillian, do you want to introduce them? Because you set up this panel. I'm sorry. Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself?
I'll just pass this mic.
Reggie's videotaping, if that's okay. Are there any other ANCs that want to come up? This is the last call on this? Okay.
I'm Nancy McWood from ANC 3C, and I represent ANC 3C09, which is part of the Cleveland Park neighborhood stretching from Wisconsin Avenue to Connecticut Avenue.
Hi, Commissioner Teresa Edmondson. I'm 1A02, which is Columbia Heights, north of Irving, Newton to Spring and Meridian, 16th Street, and the homie, and I like to say the real deal Columbia Heights, okay? The real Columbia Heights.
Hi, my name is Japer Bowles, and I am on ANC 1C, which is in Adams Morgan. My specific single-member district is basically the east side of 18th Street. So anything on 18th Street is, that's my single-member district, so welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tyrell Holcomb. I serve as Commissioner for 7F01, which is the Minnesota Avenue corridor, the business corridor, also referred to as Downtown Ward 7. And I also serve as the chairperson for ANC 7F.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Salim Adolfo. I serve as the Secretary of Commission 8C, and my single-member district is HC07, Congress Heights. That's Wheeler Road to 4th Street in between Mississippi and Alabama Avenue.
Good afternoon. My name is Janice Farabee. I represent 2F08, which is Logan Circle. My single-member district, 2F08, includes Franklin Park, which is being renovated to Planet Word, Franklin School, and Franklin Park as well as the Eaton Hotel. And this is my first year that I've completed as an ANC Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. So the questions that I'm going to be asking, we're only going to ask about 5 questions, and these were thrown together by the Grassroots Planning Steering Committee. If the folks want to raise their hands, who's on the committee? So we have Reggie, Caitlin, Nancy, Andrea, Ambrose, and where's Lark? But also Lark, right here with the camera. Okay, so here are the questions. Anyone can answer the questions if you feel comfortable. Okay, so we want to know how familiar you are with the comprehensive plan and how much has your ANC used the plan? Anyone can answer? Okay.
The question was, how familiar are we with the plan and how much has our commission used the plan? So to be completely honest, I became aware of the plan maybe a year or so ago, but I wasn't as vigilant about trying to understand what it meant to the community, to the future of the District of Columbia, probably until maybe a few months ago. And so I don't think that my commission at all we have not visited the plan as a commission. I started looking at the plan and seeing that this is too many pages for me to dissect and to have a good understanding of. So as a single member district, I partnered with some other agencies in our in Ward 8, the ANC 8A Education Committee and the Ward 8 Education Council, and we initially looked at just the education component of it, but then we decided to at least try to tackle 5 areas that we thought that, given the time and the talent that we have, and it was education, housing, arts and humanities, transportation, and economic development, and that we would try to give folks over the course of the entire month of January to look at that and then present that to the advisory neighborhood commissions in Ward 8 for the timeline of February 14th. And so we've been digging through that for the last couple of weeks.
Hi, it's Janice, 2F08. Same, I was not that familiar, and it, other than the 30 people that showed up to the Ward 2, whether that Office of Planning had, the different wards, that's about how many people in the ward know about the comp plan. For me, as an ANC, I think that's unacceptable because we are supposed to be, number one, speaking for our constituents, but we need to know that, and then the constituents need to have more time than we're given. We were given an extension, but we also created, because I've been going to stuff in Power DC, and just because of the things that I've been doing, but I brought this to our commission, and we have created a committee. So we started last year, the end of December, and we've been meeting once a week, and we also kind of created different categories, that we were concentrating on, and we will make our final recommendation at the February 5th commission in order for it to be voted on so that we can submit it by February 14th. But there is not enough time. The government has not given enough time. Absolutely unacceptable.
Commissioner Edmondson, 1A02. So I've been aware of the comprehensive plan for a couple of years, just peripherally, because I was watching what was happening with the Bruce Monroe and the PUDs. And the fact that that was a response to, the comprehensive plan being rolled out early was a response to people doing their homework and stopping just the railroading of this city, So when it's early, and this is a living, breathing document that is supposed to guide how the city, so politically I've been involved in it, but as far as how 1A recently, it just happened organically, and our commissioners, thankfully, they're people that are, have the luxury of access and time and resources to get together and, work on the elements. But anyway, so that's what happened with 1A. I am interested in the housing element and the future land use map. The good news about our commission is that the folks who are interested in other things are respectful enough to consider my perspective on it, which is, left of center, considering, they know that DC Grassroots Coalition, that my input on the comprehensive plan and housing and future land use will be aligned with DC Grassroots Coalition, and they know that. But they're willing to, to create something and compromise. Anyway, this letter, I put it on the table, and one thing that I did do, because I was so, like Janice said, it is just 1,500-page document, and these time constraints, it's like, okay. So I represent people who, a lot of Latinos, a lot of people speak Amharic, and nothing had been pointed out about the language access, and so I got my commission to support my resolution with great rate, unanimously be passed to the mayor. Speaking to, we asked for more time for this document, and also the fact that it is not, you're breaking your own law, basically, by not translating it into, the language access contracts you have for every, it's supposed to be published in every agency. So this is an example of what I did And it's a way that the ANC Commission can use their powers. Okay? There you go.
Commissioner McWood from 3C09. My familiarity, as opposed to the ANC's familiarity, began in the late 90s. Before I was a commissioner, I became a commissioner in 2021. And it was on a neighborhood development project that went before the BCA. And we discovered the comprehensive plan, didn't know anything about it prior to that. And frankly, after the case was over, we still didn't know very much about it. It's been an education over the years. Our ANC has had numerous BZA cases. We've had many fewer zoning commission cases, but I would say the zoning commission cases were the most informative. It got to the point where our ANC felt comfortable writing the first set-down report from an ANC after the Zoning Commission in 2016 authorized ANCs along with OP to write set-down reports, which are the reports the Zoning Commission receives during their process of deciding whether a case will be scheduled for a hearing. And one of the things we discovered when we did that set-down report is how much applicants cherry-pick policies in the comprehensive plan to support whatever development they are proposing. And equally, how much the Office of Planning parrots what the applicant is citing as the authority in the comprehensive plan. We wrote a 13-page report. That development proposal never saw the light of day. After we issued our report, it died. I'm not saying it was because of our report, but I don't think our report hurt that general outcome. One of the things I would say about the ANCs is there's a lot of turnover within ANCs of commissioners. You may have a commissioner that gets a fair amount of familiarity with the comprehensive plan and may be fairly good at understanding it and realizing how it's being used and how it could be used for the benefit of the community. But oftentimes those commissioners either decide not to run again or they get defeated. So the fact that there is a lot of turnover in ANCs really affects the understanding within the ANC. I would say in this current amendment process, number one, it's not an amendment process, this is a rewrite. This is substantial, there are substantial changes in here. I participated in the 2004-2006 Comprehensive Plan Task Force. I was appointed by a council member to that task force. And while there are a lot of complaints about that process, it is night and day with what is going on here. There were community meetings through over a 2-year span throughout the city. There were meetings in the wards. They were targeted. They were targeted to specific topics. There was lots of information that was provided. Then there were actually discussion groups, and policies were generated as a result of that process. In this case, the ANCs, which really don't have any background in land use planning, occasionally we get a BZA case or a zoning commission case, but we're not developing policy. This was dumped on us without any, at least my ANC was never conferred with as to whether we had the capacity, the time, or the time to handle this task that the Office of Planning handed to us. But there was no training. There was no effort to actually explain to all of the ANCs in detail what all these policies were, what these different elements involved with, how they are used, how we should look at them from our community's perspective. You know, when you just change a few words or you add a phrase, it can read like, well, this is perfectly fine, this is really great. Unless you know how it's going to be used, you can support something that in fact will not be beneficial to your community. So in general, I would say this whole process has been flawed, and I would say the involvement of the ANCs has been very unfair. We haven't been given the tools to do the task that we've been handed.
Yeah, so I guess to the question, how long have we been involved with it? There has been an ongoing process. I do know, obviously, this year it's gotten a lot hotter because now is when we're taking public comment period. So in terms of 1C, we have been having committee meetings. Our ANC has 3 committees. 1 committee deals with planning, zoning, and transportation. So it gets a lot of stuff already. However, pretty much at every single meeting we've been having people talk about it or offer any amendments to it or resolutions at our meeting actually happened on the day that Ward 1 or Mid-City had their community outreach meeting. So OP did come and speak to our ANC and they did offer questions. I will say that they were kind of helpful in terms of like what information they were accepting from ANCs. Looking at it, it is a very daunting document, and our ANC is mostly honing in on the mid-city element, which is the element that the Adams Morgan neighborhood is in. And we've been focusing in on that and looking at our neighborhood element and trying to hone in on what makes the best future changes for us. The flume doesn't make any changes in 1C, so we don't necessarily are tackling that on an ANC basis.
What's
so,
the flume? What's the flume?
Yeah, the future land use map, and there is quite. This is a map that. The government oh yeah, hey, there's pictures of it. Essentially, it is changing what the land will be used for, and there's all different types of, well yeah, there's a legend and it's like 15 different types of zones. So luckily or unluckily, we don't have to deal with that, so we're honing in on different elements, and then really looking at building the narrative of Adams Morgan. I know that that's a big piece, that looking at the suggestions here, when we're talking about a community, we would actually like that community to be named instead of some vague term. Adams Morgan has a historically Latino Hispanic community. We want that in the comprehensive plan. We don't want to say previously displaced community. Like, we want to know what community was there and how we can increase the opportunity for that community to stay there. And I think using the name and clarifying definitions is definitely something we'll be taking on. I will also point out that we are also looking at other ANCs and seeing what they are passing. And luckily 1A is just right across the street. And they're passing a lot of good stuff, and we are trying to share as much as of what we know, and I definitely think that there's people who have time to do this. They're able to do the resource and put the time into this, and hopefully share. And so I do think that there is a failure on OP to not allow us to share, or I mean, it's not like we're not allowed to share, but not giving us a system to share ideas to actually mobilize this. They're like, here's the 1,500-page document. Good luck on advocating for whatever your issues are. And it is very difficult for an ANC to manage something like that. So it really is people who have ideas and residents from the communities or coalitions and groups coming and saying, hey, could you pass this? Here's the document. Look at it, say yay or nay. And it's really easy, not so easy lobbying, but a really easy advocating. Not a lot of people are putting anything out to an ANC. So I think if you have some type of draft document and are able to share it and have quality bullet points behind it, I definitely think it would be able to make effective change and get ANCs to pass resolutions, especially if it's already like written and where, when, how to adopt the amendment. It's a very hard task, and having special groups such as this being able to do that for us is great, especially if you're a trusted group.
So 7F, one of the things in terms of familiarity, coming on the commission, I was not as familiar with the comprehensive plan, especially not to the degree that I am with now. And so to echo what some of my fellow colleagues have said, the document itself is so robust, and in terms of somebody trying to be an expert or really familiarize themselves with it, it really requires the extent, the time that would be required, the extent of time that would be required, the timeline that we have, that we were given does not allow that opportunity, nor does the extension we were given. ANC 7F actually passed a resolution that would have extended the timeline to April. Obviously, it wasn't extended to April, and just a few days were tacked on to the original timeline. And so I think one of the challenges that, from a commissioner standpoint, coming into the commission, I'm entering my fourth year now. So I've been a commissioner for 3 years. And one of the things that I think about is the initial training that you get as a commissioner. One of the things that is not discussed when you come on board as a commissioner is the comprehensive plan and how it really shapes communities, especially in my community, which is a business corridor with the Minnesota Avenue corridor, and then the number of apartment complexes that have been built over the past 5, 6, 7 years. And so really looking at how some of the legislation that has been passed in the city, i.e. the House Production Trust Fund, and how that impacts communities, specifically communities of color, and understanding how we ensure that as development happens, that we are not displacing residents that have lived in communities for years and years, and generations as well. But understanding the implications that are there with Housing Production Trust Fund and zoning, there were some aspects in my SMD that were rezoned during the map amendments 10 years ago that paved the way for one of the developments to be built as a matter of right. Opposed to if it would have stayed the way it was zoned previously, the commission would have had the opportunity to weigh in and even the opportunity for a community benefit agreement, opposed to this developer saying that I'm coming to the ANC out of courtesy, not because I have to. And so that's something too frequently that we as a commission have heard just in my tenure on the commission. And so one of the things that we started doing in Ward 7 is we started meeting, all of the chairs of commissions started having a meeting on a monthly basis, and we started talking about the comprehensive plan and how we could really drive the comment portion as a commission, but then also to our community. So what we did in ANC 7F, I attended a meeting, ABC 365, which is a group that's in ANC 7F, and they have a monthly meeting, and they pulled in some commissioners at a particular meeting, and we talked about how we can ensure the community has the opportunity to give input. And so a number of commissions I know did this in various ways. So what we allowed community members to do was to email their comments that they would like to have added, and then we're turning this all into a resolution that will be a part of the commission's comments as well. So really ensuring that we capture what it is the community has to say as well as the commission has to say, and that we're adding that great weight behind it. And so really understanding that Office of Planning attended our October meeting, right? And so Office of Planning is really, what I see is this system of let's ensure we check off the box, right? And I think that's one of the things that we see too often in our city. It's about ensuring that we check off the box, but not necessarily ensuring that we capture the information or capture the comments, capture what it is that the community has to say about issues and about matters that quite essentially will impact and affect us for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so I think it's really important that we continue, yes, to capture these comments and ensure that we're providing the great weight, but we have to begin to really push back to our city and the government and the elected leaders and say, we're tired of checking off the box. We want to know that this is meaningful and that it's really going to go somewhere.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Commissioner Delia Househill, and I'm with ANC 7E. My single member district is 7E06, which covers the Marshall Heights, Capitol View, and Benning Ridge neighborhoods. I know this is the first question, so I'll try to keep my response very succinct and quick. Our commission, I'm a new commissioner, this is my first term. I knew very little, if anything at all, about the comprehensive plan when I first heard about it through some emails from the Office of Planning. And so while I do echo some of the sentiments that my colleagues share around the lack of just preparation, one of the things that I would actually like to give the Office of Planning kudos, because if it wasn't for them, I would not have been able to really educate my constituents and other commissioners about the process for understanding the plan, how do you review the plan, all of those good things. And so obviously when I found out about how important the plan was, I reached out to the Office on Planning. They set up some sidebar conversations with them. They gave me lots of information and resources and tools to learn more about the plan, and I in turn worked with a few other individuals to turn that information into readily digestible information for my constituents. And what that resulted in was working with a few groups like the Healthcare Alliance and the Marshall Heights Community Development Organizations and some of my other ANCs to, we actually hosted a comprehensive planning meeting for our community. And we also developed a little cheat sheet, because I think most folks have mentioned that it's a 1,500-page document, very difficult to navigate through. So we created a little cheat sheet that allowed our constituents the opportunity to really, to quickly go through the plan and pick areas of interest to them. We also developed a survey that had each of the comprehensive plan elements highlighted with a link to the document and a space for constituents to kind of put in comments. And again, just being new to the commission, it was a daunting task. But I definitely would like to thank the Office of Planning for giving me the tools and the resources. And while I do agree that there totally has not been enough time given to commissioners to respond adequately, I do think the responsibility does also fall back on commissioners. As your elected officials, I feel like it's our responsibility to be proactive, to go out, find out information that is important to all of you, and take the necessary steps to fulfill any knowledge gaps that we may have about this issue, right? And so that's the only thing that I have to differ with some of my colleagues on. I do think the responsibility was really on us to do that. And I'll just stop with there because I know that's the first question and I don't want to belabor the topic.
All right, thank you. Because we're operating on a limited amount of time, we're going to try to limit the comments to at least like 2 to 3 minutes. I do appreciate the feedback because I want to talk to y'all more about this. Let's see. So of course, you've all read your area elements, but have you read and engaged with the citywide elements? Because I do know that there are certain chapters that will tell you to refer back to the land use element, housing element, and I think right now our primary concern as a Grassroots Planning Coalition is the housing element, but of course also land use and economic development. So what has your engagement been like with these other citywide chapters, if any?
So since I'm holding the mic, I'll be very quick and short. You're absolutely right. One of the challenges that we have experienced is really just finding individuals that would take the lead on reviewing some of those separate elements, right? Because it's a 15-page document, totally unrealistic for any one person to kind of go through all of those different elements. And so what we try to do is coordinate with groups like our Education Council to say, hey, are you guys, or can you take the lead on reviewing the education element? Or working with the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization, which deals with housing issues, to say, hey, can you guys look at the housing element, and then you send us your comments back. So those are some of the strategies that we've used to tackle that.
And for us, we did housing, and I'm the chair of the Public Space and Transportation, so I took transportation. So we had a couple of chunks where we were able to put, subcommittee members that were responsible for those, and then for me, even further near Northwest and Central Washington. But I did the whole transportation, going through the whole, city, the citywide element, and that's basically what we've done.
So there's a couple of things. In terms of the housing, we broke it down to Ward A specific and the area element. And I just happened to look at some of the stuff on my own across the city, and some of the things that stick out to me, especially when I see some of the other documents you gave us, is where, for example, public housing and shelters are going to be placed as we move forward. And we don't see some of those things in other parts of the city as we do east of the river. So those are red flags to me that stuck out the most, especially with the shelters. And I think that when you concentrate poverty in one community, you're not only concentrating poverty in terms of financial elements of our community, but the creativity. You're concentrating the education level of people who are poverty stricken in one place. So then it's going to make it difficult for us to be able to expand into other areas of life and improve the quality of life if you're just going to concentrate all of that in one area. And obviously we know those other areas will be able to flourish because they will have a higher concentration of people who have more access to resources. So that stuck out. But then also the issue of public housing, I'm still learning a whole lot more, but one of the things that I think I'm starting to see, and I don't think this is just DC specific, but maybe across the country, is that we're moving away from public housing to where we're moving to a space where a lot of the public housing is going to be privatized, but it'll have federal subsidies. And so I'm definitely not in support of that. I've actually seen that happen in the military, where the housing on the military bases have gone away and they're privately run. And so I think those are some of the biggest things that will definitely impact us. But the challenges I'm seeing in Ward 8 is when we ask some of the folks to participate and come out, they're just not as aware of other things that they need to be. So when they get to the table, there's still a deficit there to get them to try to understand what some of the things that they're seeing. So that's where we're kind of at right now.
Yeah, I echo the sentiments that some of my commissioners have, my colleagues have said already, in terms of looking at how the overall city plan or the elements impact Ward specifically. I think one of the things too is like looking at how Office of Planning, one of the things they did was like broke out by kind of like neighborhoods or boundaries. They did like fact sheets in terms of an overview of what the plan calls for. But one of the things that would have been really helpful is to look at by ANC and see how the elements will impact each ANC, so at that broad citywide scale, but then also too from the ANC's perspective as well, looking at each ANC. But I think also too, one of the things that's been critically helpful for me as well is like relying on some community members, one of who is here today, who brought up some of those issues, specifically around the housing piece, looking at how we're concentrating. Ward 7, I think it's no secret, looking at how development has moved throughout the city. Ward 7 really is that last frontier. And so looking at the way that the city has really concentrated the number of affordable housing. Specifically in 7F, we have 3 particular complexes that total about 500 units, and there's actually a second phase that's on the way for one of the other properties, which will bring that total up to about 600, close to 700 units, of what's supposed to be deeply affordable housing. And so looking at how we really tackle the issue of systemic poverty,